the origins of what we call economics today go back to the 1870s. And before then, you had what was called the classical school of economics, which was stuff from Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Boo Boo, Hiss, Karl Marx. Now, in the hands of Smith and Ricardo, classical theory was championed capitalism against effectively feudalism. And what Marx did was turn it to attack capitalism in favor of what he thought would be socialism. And at that point, the intellectual backing for economics changed from being the Ricardo and Smith mob to people who meant three particular characters matter. William Stanley Jevons in the UK, England, in Menger in Austria, and Walras in France. And they all said capitalism is a system designed for the satisfaction of human wants. And they had a subjective theory that it's all about capitalism lets us maximize our utility compared to what we would get if we had a central distribution system or so on. And an essential part of their thinking was that capitalism achieves equilibrium. And they did that not because they believed it achieved equilibrium, but they realized mathematics of modeling non-equilibrium is just too hard. And they also left money out of it because, again, it was hard enough modeling trade, trying to model trade and monetary as well, just too difficult. Well, they were practical choices about how to model the economy back in the 1870s, which became points of religion in the 20th century. So rather than seeing equilibrium as a short-term crutch until we can develop dynamic analysis methods, which is what the 19th century forebears of neoclassical economics expected, in the 20th century, they said, oh, capitalism achieves equilibrium, and capitalism is really a barter system. We can ignore all this monetary stuff. So you have the dominant analysis of capitalism, presuming its main feature is achieving equilibrium, and the believing that the monetary system doesn't matter. Now, what planet is that? Okay, it's not the one we're on. The strengths of capitalism are it's how it copes with non-equilibrium, disequilibrium, change, and vitality. And funnily enough, Marx said it best, talking about the bourgeoisie, as he called them in the communist revolution. He said previous dominant social classes is all about maintaining and not changing the social and political and economic structure. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without revolutionizing the system. And everlasting uncertainty, this is one of his phrases. And that's beautiful and that's true, and that's the strength of capitalism. It's far better at everlasting uncertainty within the parameters of the planet that we had back when you could describe it as William Beaumont did as cowboy capitalism, when you've got the vast open spaces of the prairie rather than spaceship capitalism where we're crowded all together now. So what we have is a completely inappropriate model of capitalism, exalting it for equilibrium, which is not a feature of capitalism, talking about it being a barter system, which is not capitalism. That's the dominant way of thinking about the economy. But it's one of these classic things which I think it was mentioned, the American humorist mentioned, put it best. He said, to every human problem, there is a solution that is neat, plausible, and wrong. And that is fundamentally mainstream economics. And numerous times they've proved their own logic wrong. And their excuse is to say, okay, let's make a simplifying assumption and hop over this problem. And at the superficial level, if you don't go down and examine the substructure, and what is the foundations itself, it can look quite persuasive, supply and demand diagrams, utility maximizing models and stuff like that. When you go and look at the foundations, they're all rotten. And therefore, when they make a simplifying assumption, it's an absurd simplifying assumption. Like, for example, and I'm not joking, this is Paul Samuelson, let's assume there's a centralized authority that redistributes income before trade takes place. And that's part of the model of capitalism. 1956, Paul Samuelson, taught these days in the main textbook. So what people think is an explanation for capitalism, if you sit outside economic theory, is a complete distortion of the system itself. And that, therefore, has led us to catastrophes like the financial crisis without having any warning for it whatsoever from their theory, when if you don't have their blinkers on, it was obvious there was going to be a financial crisis. So it's something which works in good times and is catastrophically bad in bad times. And despite Rodrigo being an optimist here, I'm going to say we're in bad times. We need a theory that can cope with the world in a bad situation, and it's not neoclassical economics.